Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. And I would call council's attention. Are there any regrets? I don't see any. I think we have a full house. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? No. And would two of you like to move and second resolution into the committee of the whole? Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Khan, all in favor? Opposed if any, and that carries. We have no consent items, but we have two confidential consent items. Councillor Duddick? Does anybody need to go into camera for these? The reports are as written. Councillor Bird. C1. All right. Councillor Bird moves that we go in camera for the purpose of considering a matter involving litigation or potential litigation, which is one of the permitted uses of a closed meeting. And all in favor? Opposed, if any. Madam Clerk, would you rig the chamber for a closed meeting? And to the public, I need to ask you to give us a few minutes alone together, and we'll call you as soon as we We'll now resume our public session. Council has met in a meeting closed to the public, which is permitted under the Municipal Act for a matter concerning litigation or potential litigation, and Council has given direction to legal staff. Councillor Duddick, item C2.
Be pleased to move it, Your Worship, along with the memo, I believe, where is that, C3?
Oh, you want to jump to C3 as well?
No. That plus the next one, yes.
Okay, so
So
Councillor
C2
Duddick,
and then C3 along with, was there not the memo that was to be associated?
yes, so the wording you want is under C3, that legal staff be instructed to present to the Ontario Municipal Board the modifications to the Livable Oakville Plan detailed in the confidential report dated February 8th, 2012, and the memo dated February 27th, 2012. And item C2 is the recommendation that the town not participate in the appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board regarding Committee of Adjustment decision B11211612 regarding 303 Allen Street. All in favor of the recommendations?
We'd like a separation in C3.
C.
I was trying to get your attention.
All right, I'll call the vote on C2. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That is adopted. C3, is there a need to go into camera?
Later on.
Okay.
Your Worship, at some point, I'd like a presentation on one of them.
Okay. So we will not move on, we will not pass, we'll defer it down the agenda to the end after the public sessions.
Fine.
With Councillor Duddick's motion and her approval. Great. So that brings us to our discussion item. However, since we have some interest in the public in a later item in the agenda, I imagine Council might be willing to also wait to do item 1 and to move directly to the item of public interest. So I don't see any objection, so I'll take that for consent. So we have two Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee items, and let me just ask the audience, is anyone here for the Kading House item, or are you here for the 2nd Street item? 2nd Street. Kading House hands? There are Kading House hands. Well, you're first, even though you're less numerous. Are there any members of the public who wish to delegate on this item or provide information to council on this item? All right then. Who would like to give me a motion for 6? Do I have a hand for that?
For 6A?
Kading 057.
Kading. So who would like to give me a motion? Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to make, if I can find it here, the following motion for 6A, that heritage permit application HP 01/12-42 20D for the salvage of a portion of the walls of the Canning House and demolition of the remaining materials at 237 Dundas Street West, as attached in Appendix A to the report dated January 27th, 2012 from Planning Services, be deferred.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess, Council, if you have a memo from planning staff, but for the public's benefit who may not see it, if Council chooses to defer this, the application will be presented to Heritage Oakville with the additional information that is developed on March 27th, with a final review by Council on April 10th.
Correct.
All in
Correct.
favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries. And that brings us to 6B, and this is the Heritage Permit application for a new addition and restoration work at number 50 2nd Street. And I understand we have some registered delegations for this? So, Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegations, and then we'll poll the audience for any additional.
If Mr. Boyd Waits, representing the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, would like to come forward.
Welcome, Mr. Waite. We look forward to your information. And Council has your written submission already. I know I do.
You do? Because I don't think I actually
Well, I
sent it
have
in.
a written submission here. Maybe it's...
It may be from the last council meeting
Oh, that's...
Oh, this was distributed at Heritage on the 14th.
or Heritage, yeah. I have a new
new one?
delegation, which I didn't have time to get it in by the timeline.
All right.
So, as you know, my name is Boyd Waits. I'm president of Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, and I'm representing the OLRA today. We represent over 50% of the households in our area, and that's bounded by 16 Mile Creek, the lake, Lakeshore Road, and Chartwell Road. And it includes two heritage districts, the Old Oakville Heritage District and the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District. I also live at 87 Allen Street within the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District. So while OLRA appreciates the architect has made some changes to the proposal for 52nd Street to accommodate earlier concerns raised by neighbours and the OLRA, namely the change to a cedar roof and removing 18 feet from the total depth of the proposal, we still feel strongly that this proposal does not fit in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District. The proposal is contemporary in nature, and while the easterly elevation is considered to be less problematic, the west, south, and north elevations simply do not respect the Heritage District Plan that was put into effect in 1988. We consider the decision by the Heritage Committee to recommend approval of this proposal to be a serious departure from decisions made in the past relative to new additions on identified heritage homes. And if approved, this will set a precedent in the area for new applications coming forward. There is no evidence in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District of any other homes having this type of contemporary treatment, to the extent that more or less we are considering approving only the facade of the original house to remain, with an addition that is approximately twice the size and not sympathetic to the existing house. The district plan clearly states buildings of 1 and 2 category are important because they define the heritage character of the district area. Conserving these buildings with minimal changes is encouraged. However, if alterations or additions are being considered, they should be sympathetic to the original structure, and compatible or sympathetic alterations should exhibit the following details: proportional scale and mass, consistent roof design, similar window details, complementary colors, and compatible materials. I'd like to go through each elevation, and I have some, can these be displayed on the projector?
If you put them there, we'll catch up.
Okay.
technical assistance will follow quickly.
Okay, so firstly, on the east elevation, the garage is of contemporary design and is embedded within the frontage here. The district plan states that the visual impact of garages may be minimized by placing them to the rear or side of the house. The new dormer window here is not consistent with the old, having a flat roof design as opposed to the roof on this one. The transitional windows are completely out of scale with the existing windows on this elevation. That's these windows in the middle compared to the existing. On the south elevation, the large window designs in general are out of scale with the existing windows, and again the dormer windows have a flat roof design. The very large and long flat roof, which is here, is not consistent with the roof lines found in the existing house or the surrounding stock. The district plan states retention of existing roof lines along the streetscape is encouraged. New roof lines should complement the area's existing roof pattern. It also appears in this elevation that sections of the roofing above the windows and between the windows, here and here, are still to be of zinc materials, and that whereas the district plan states materials used on new roofs should be consistent with other buildings in the area, historically many buildings in Oakville contained wood shingle roofs. It is encouraged that wood shingles be considered for new roofs or reshingling. When new materials are required, it is recommended that they match or complement the original. Metals and plastics are discouraged. In addition, the addition hides most of the original house. You can only see this little piece here. The north elevation, the windows are again very, very large and of contemporary design, and they do not appear to be compatible or sympathetic to the original house. The flat roof lines are not compatible to those shown on the original house. So that's here. So you should ask yourself, is this addition compatible or sympathetic to the original house on these elevations I'm showing you? On the east side, again, the issues are very similar to the other elevations. Large, out-of-scale modern window design, flat roof lines, and zinc materials, none of which are compatible with the existing home, and as such do not fit within the district plan. All of these elevations are clearly visible from the streetscape on 2nd Street, but also on 1st and Union Streets. And it's clear with the district plan that the intent is to encourage complementary or sympathetic additions to these buildings. There is no reference to allowing such a large contemporary addition with its overscale windows, inconsistent window treatment, and flat roofing. The heritage guidelines or the district plan have worked well over the years, and there have been a number of new builds, renovations, and additions undertaken, where owners have gone to great lengths and expense to ensure they are within the guidelines as set out. And the results have worked well within the context of the area. Regarding 52nd Street, OLRA contacted a heritage expert for a very quick opinion on review of the proposal document and the town staff report. Unfortunately, he can't be here tonight as he had a prior engagement. Dan Chalikoff is an experienced heritage professional in the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, having been vice president of that organization, and is qualified as an expert witness in heritage matters before the Conservation Review Board and the Ontario Municipal Board. He is a long-time Oakville resident and a former chair of Heritage Oakville, which was previously known as LACAC. We're going to be distributing copies of his findings, and I highly encourage you to read them. Essentially, he points out many inconsistencies with the process, and I have a few quotes from his findings. The term restoration work appears a few times in the opening pages of this document, yet relatively long-standing practices, now common in Canadian conservation work, appear absent from the report. Specifically, the town's heritage staff would be expected to produce or request preparation of a prioritized list of character-defining attributes and values of the existing heritage resource immediately upon learning of proposed alterations. Neither in the architect's heritage application nor in the subject planning services report is such a document referenced. A heritage impact assessment, which is typically required on heritage properties in 3 adjacent municipalities, Milton, Burlington, and Mississauga, and which this consultant alone has prepared or peer-reviewed on multiple occasions for each locale, would have produced a list of character-defining attributes and values of 52nd Street, as well as presented researched and documented background reports on the historical, contextual, and design contributions of both the existing property and the proposed property, and their respective contributions to the areas. From that HIA, a conservation plan detailing precisely how the applicant would deal with each character-defining attribute and value would have addressed the more tangible issues such as window, porch, soffit, brickwork, etc. In closing, we strongly urge Council to reject this proposal consistently with the decisions made in the past and ensure the ongoing preservation of heritage in our area. Failing rejection of the proposal, we would ask that at least a heritage impact study is requested and its findings reviewed as pertains to this proposal for 52nd Street and be put back through the heritage process. And just finally, I would like to ask for a response from town planning regarding process issues that were highlighted by us on January 16th. Namely, we ask specifically that Council consider a review of the heritage approval process to include the following: Heritage Committee notifications to residents, timelines of documents posted to the town's website, the appointment of members on the Heritage Committee and how residents should be included, a review of town documentation and its consistency with the approved heritage plans, and we'd also like to now add the requirement of a heritage impact assessment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your information. Would you mind explaining, you said you'd like council to reject the application, and I understood you then to say something on the order of, in the alternative, could you just flesh that out for me?
In the alternative, as actually Dan Chalikoff in his report that we'll distribute suggests that there should be a heritage impact assessment document, and we would urge council to request that that be provided for this proposal.
Okay. I didn't understand how that's an alternative. I mean, approve it and require the HIA?
It may not be an alternative, but maybe reject and require that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. Questions? Thank you very much, Boyd.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Dennis Bastian.
Welcome, Mr. Bastian. Council
Thank you,
looks
Mr.
forward
Mayor.
to your information.
Now I'm just going to go back here for a sec to the main page. I did bring some photos. Sorry. Is that better? Perfect. Voila. Okay. Terrific. Thank you. Good evening, honorable council members and Mayor Burton. My name is Denis Bastian, and I have lived at 41 2nd Street. I'm a professional real estate appraiser, and I've been appraising residential properties in the Oakville area for the past 24 years. I specialize in the southeast Oakville and have appraised many heritage properties during this time frame. I would also like to mention that I sat on Heritage Committee during the period of 2000 to 2002. As you are aware, we are here to object strenuously to the proposed contemporary addition to 52nd Street. I would like to begin by saying that our remarks are not personal in any way, but should be viewed as objections to what we believe are unauthorized changes in the town's interpretation of our Heritage District Plan. All of us in Oakville appreciate the contribution that Gren Weiss has made over the years to preserving our heritage architecture, His work has made a positive impact throughout the Oakville district, not only in Heritage, but all the outlying areas as well. We are here, however, however, outraged that the current proposal for 52nd Street cleverly attempts to disguise and diminish the historic dwelling and strip it of its charm and character in order to build a contemporary addition. This proposal clearly is not in keeping with the spirit or intent of either the provincial or district heritage plans. The proposed addition is described by the town in the report as contemporary and modern in design. The Heritage and Provincial Act clearly state that any additions to heritage dwellings should be sympathetic, compatible, and subordinate to the existing structure. This does not mean contemporary. This addition does not fit or meet any of these criteria, and we do not want this precedent in any of our heritage districts. If we look around 1st and 2nd Street, we certainly do not see any contemporary structures or additions. We see heritage homes, Victorian, Georgian, Italianate, shingle style, Tudor, vernacular architectural influences. I am not aware, in my professional opinion as an appraiser, of any contemporary architecture inside this district. I have a few photos to show you along 1st and 2nd Street. These are the type of properties that we do see along this heritage district. And again, all types of influences that were previously mentioned, but certainly none contemporary. This is the old Romaine house. And this is a corner property at Union and 1st Street. And again, down 31 1st Street. Again, an addition on this property at 55 2nd Street. And again, an ensemble of different architectural flavors along the street, but certainly no contemporary influence here whatsoever. That just gives you an idea. Do not believe that there is any authority whatsoever for the town to change its interpretation of this historic bylaw enacted in 1988. We consider this a violation of the bylaw. Before such a law is changed, surely public input is required. I would suggest to town councillors that you are the very people who must protect our democratic rights and ensure that the public consultation takes place before such a drastic precedent is set. The 1st and 2nd Street District Plan clearly states that Category 2 buildings, and I quote, should be conserved with minimal changes. This particular home is also featured in the 1st and 2nd District Plan as a Category 2 home, and again I quote, which is a good example of contextual building in the area. On the original home, the new proposal does not restore the original double-hung 1/1 windows, but instead uses a contemporary cottage style which is not seen elsewhere on the street and is not authentic to the period. Large full glass fenestration is proposed for the south and rear elevations, and these proposed contemporary window treatments are not in compliance with the bylaw. With regards, we can see this in another picture that I brought along with me. These are the proposed drawings were shown before. As we can see in the rear additions here, again, large glass fenestrations, mainly here, and we barely see the original residence, which is covered by 3/4 here of the proposed addition. And this is what it would look like upon completion on the rear. With regards to the addition, the provincial guidelines are very specific and clearly state that we should make the new work physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. In addition, the guidelines stipulate we should conserve the heritage value and character defining elements of the historic home when creating any new additions to an historic place and any related new construction. This proposal has done exactly the opposite, and the rear and south elevations of the original home are no longer recognizable. The style of windows and dormers of the historic home have not been carried through to the addition, and the featured zinc roof cladding where the district plan clearly states that use of metal is discouraged. The garage doors and transitionary windows are off-center, which make the facade even more contemporary. The dormer above the garage is disproportionately large to the original home and incorporates a flat roof design which does not emulate the hip design on the original home, thereby again violating the heritage principle of subordination and compatibility with the historic dwelling. The back of the historic home, as clearly seen by this photo, has been completely obliterated and is overwhelmingly subordinate to the massive addition, which again is in direct opposition to the provincial guidelines. The district plan clearly states that maintaining compatible scale and mass is encouraged for additions, and yet the addition dwarfs the historic home. The flat roof line on the back addition, in conjunction with the zinc metal cladding and massive block of contemporary windows, is not compatible with the original historic dwelling. As well, the rear and side elevations, which are clearly visible from both Union and First Street, do not conform to the streetscape and district context, which is critical in any application for change within a heritage district. The attempt to make contemporary additions distinguishable from the historic place, in this case, has been clearly achieved. However, two additional criteria of compatible with and subordinate to have not been adopted and do not comply with the heritage bylaw guidelines. We've heard the defense that the proposal is in compliance with the lot coverage guidelines and no zoning variance is required. We would like to categorically state that this lack of variance issue has nothing to do with our objections. The contemporary structure and proposal is clearly in violation of both the district and provincial heritage bylaw, and we repeat that we do not believe that there is any authority to do this. We appeal to our councillors and the mayor to defend this historic bylaw. In closing, we would like to say that if this proposal is approved today and this dangerous precedent is set, then everything that previous heritage committees and the Historical Society have worked so hard to achieve over many long years will be jeopardized, because there will be no basis on which to deny future contemporary additions or new constructions. We conclude by recommending that the proposal be denied. The next proposal should include a full heritage impact study and review. And here I have photos of sympathetic renovations that have taken place inside this district. This is a property at 51 2nd Street. This photo was taken when it was purchased, probably in the 80s. I'm not sure specifically on dates. Again, defining the front, and this is the addition. Actually, Gren Weiss did this one, and again, you can see the compelling difference, subordinate to and compatible with, in this addition. The next one here is along 2nd Street. This is the neighboring property to the one in question at 50. This is the original look, and this is after a rehabilitation and along with a small addition put at the back. Next one is a designated property. I don't recall the history on this one specifically, but again, this photo was taken 30 years ago. And again, a different front facade of the same property. And this is the renovation, addition, rehabilitation to the existing structure. Again, maintaining compatibility. Next photo is 37 First Street. Again, the original residence that was acquired. Again, a different front elevation on this property. And again, after rehabilitation, being very sympathetic to the original structure. And one more, this is 76. This is a designated property called the Grove, circa 1890s, I believe it is, before additions were put on. Again, this is a Gren Weiss addition that was put on, this property. This is before. Again, a different elevation of the before. A street scene. And again, this is after. Again, very compatible with the existing and original structure. And lastly,
Question?
sorry,
I'm-
I'm over time limit.
You're
am
a
I?
little over time.
Fair enough.
It's a touch.
That's okay.
But I allowed it because it looked to me like you were nearing the end of your list, but perhaps I was wrong. You do have quite a good inventory here.
Thank you.
So I wonder if I could ask you a question.
Sure.
We heard that flat roofs were kind of an issue. I just wanted to see if flat roofs are really the issue. In the ones that you showed us here, at 56 Second Street,
Bear with me, I'm going to dig that up.
so perhaps to vary an old famous Canadian expression, perhaps it's...
This one here, Mr. Mayor?
Perhaps it's not flat roof, it's flat roofs if necessary, but not necessarily flat roofs or something like that.
Well, this is, again, the design, the addition was very sympathetic to the original structure. I guess this has to do perhaps with lot coverage, and then also the addition at the rear also encompasses elements from the original house as well.
Right, so just to assist me, I'm concluding that there's other elements besides the pitch or flatness of the roof that are important here, and that, in this case at least, the flatness of the roof wasn't a killer issue.
No, actually, I think for the most part, it's the materials that were used, are going to be used in Gren's design, which throw everything off and given an element that's completely and distinctly different than this addition. And that being the element of a zinc cladding on that roof banding.
So I just want to be sure I'm hearing you correctly.
Yep.
Your concern's more of materials and massing than it might be as to the slope of the roof.
Well, it's compatibility with and subordinate to that structure. And if you look at both these structures, they were built roughly in the same period. And again, this addition is very minuscule in comparison to what is being proposed.
Okay, so that's why I said massing is really
Yeah,
more of
is
your
an issue,
issue, and compatibility and subordination, and flatness. You don't want me to be sidetracked down the road of worrying about flatness as much as these other things, is that correct?
Well, it's the element of everything together, correct?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thanks very much for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Miss Beth Rose is listed next.
Could I put a summarize for the neighborhoods? I'd like two other presenters to go first, and I'm going to give a summary, if that's fine.
We're in committee. We're relaxed.
Okay, then Jamie McCray. Is Jamie, oh,
Easy.
okay.
Welcome, Mr. McCray.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I have a speech here which I could hand out. Good evening. My name is Jamie McCray. I live at 65 Navy Street. My background includes the restoration of heritage structures, construction of new additions on heritage structures, and the construction of new homes to fit in with heritage districts. I'm a member of the town's Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee, but here tonight I'm speaking to you tonight as a private citizen. You've heard the revisions have been made to this application over time. However, based on the specific recommendation guidelines set out in the district plan, I do not believe that the current proposal for change for 52nd Street meets the criteria. I request the council send this application back for further revision. In considering my request, I'd like to make the following points. As you know, 52nd Street is a Category 2 building in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation Plan, and as such it's recognized within the plan as contributing to the contextual significance of the area and the compatibility of the overall streetscape. That is a critical point that we must always consider. When change happens to any structures within the district, we must remember it impacts the overall streetscape that is so vitally important to retaining the defining heritage charm of the area. 52nd Street is not a standalone building. It's part of the greater whole, a heritage district. As a result of the streetscape context, the guidelines in the district plan clearly state that if alterations or additions are being considered to Category 2 buildings, they should be compatible to or sympathetic with the original structure. Compatible to or sympathetic with are terms that one might say are subject to interpretation. However, the district plan lays out specific recommendations on how to interpret these terms. Again, this is to guide decision-making about change within the context of not only the individual property, but the streetscape as well. There are 5 specific recommendations for alterations to Category 2 structures that I don't think are being met by the 52nd Street proposal you have now here before you. Scale and mass. Well, that's been well described from previous speakers. The scale and massing of the current proposal is still oversized and over the top in relation to the original structure, and the visual effect is pronounced in relation to the overall streetscape. Roofline and detail. The guidelines state that new roofline should complement the existing area's roof patterns. That's the existing area's roof patterns. The district plan highlights gable, hip, gambrel styles as being integral to the area. Flat roofs, as proposed for part of the addition at 52nd Street, are not part of the defining characteristics of the district. Windows are often described as the eyes of the house. There is conflicting evidence regarding the original style of windows on this 1920s house. The district plan encourages that if replacements required, that there be consistency involved in such things as duplication of pattern and pane arrangement. I'm not confident that the window pattern and the pane arrangement envisioned for 52nd Street proposal is consistent with the originals of the house. We can look to the house at the north, which has multiple panes and was built in a similar era as potential evidence that the windows were more than 1/1. Materials. The district plan highlights the types of materials found in the area, including clapboard, wood shingle siding, brick, stucco, and stone. It specifically states that metal, plastics are discouraged, and yet the current proposal at 52nd Street includes zinc cladding and roofing material. Garages. The overall structure of 52nd Street does not have a garage attached. The district plan highlights that the impact of garages may be minimized by placing them to the rear or to the side of the house. Under the current proposal, the addition includes a garage on the front facade with minimal setback from the original structure. This has a pronounced impact on the streetscape. I'm not opposed to change, the alterations to and additions to the heritage structures. In fact, I have worked with the applicant's architect, Gren Weiss, on a number of projects, and I know he has considerable talent and the ability to design changes that can be compatible with or sympathetic to the guidelines set out in the Heritage District plans. I don't believe that the current proposal for change at 52nd Street meets the specific recommendations and the guidelines set out in the 1st and 2nd Street District Plan. I know that our community and town council is proud of the work that has been done over the years to protect and preserve the heritage streetscapes while allowing for compatible and sympathetic change. As a result, I'd like to request the council send this application back for further revision. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. I wonder if, did you hear my conversation with Denny about the
flat roof?
At 56 2nd Street?
50, yes, okay.
So I'm just looking for guidance from you as to how important the flat roof issue is. Is that like a secondary issue as opposed to a primary issue? Or is that the help us place that issue in
Like Denny
context.
said, you know, that addition may have a flat roof, but the addition it doesn't take away from the heritage building.
Right.
Um,
So does that mean that if it met more important criteria, it could have a flat roof? Or does that mean that a flat roof can't be contemplated?
Well, the proposal at 52nd Street is over the top. It's imposing on the streetscape and
Right,
the
so-
original house.
Let's suppose everything else came to your satisfaction. Help me understand where flat fits in.
I don't know how to answer that one.
Well, is it your first issue or your last issue? Or is it near the top of your list or near the bottom of your list? I mean, give us some idea of priority.
This is almost a development that should be sent back and reworked totally. There are a lot of issues here. We're taking down a mature tree. The attached garage is a modern concept. The coach house, or a garage set back on the property, is heritage. I think one of the problems here is the garage is attached to the house. What changes could be made? Gren Weiss is an amazing architect. Don't underestimate Gren Weiss. He can do, he has...
I'll stipulate that. Look how many people he got to come out tonight.
Take 19 Navy Street as an example. That's a brick building across the street from the museum. A brick house with a large addition on the back, brick in this case, and a coach house at the back of the property. Absolutely beautiful. Fits in, a real asset to the Heritage District. As an example, you might not want to copy that, but it can be done.
Okay.
And this thing just seems to be going in the wrong direction. My feel is that the Heritage Committee, when making the decision, didn't want to send it back for the third time. And another comment was made, this has come a long way from the first proposal. In other words, it's improved every time. But it's still not there yet. It doesn't meet the guidelines that's set up in this book here. And there's no point in having guidelines if we don't follow them. Does that answer the question?
No, but the avoidance of the question is a form of answer too, so that's okay.
I'm sorry if I avoided the question.
It's okay.
I don't know how to answer that question.
I'm actually taking from the excursion that we took in answering the question, I'm taking that if everything else were right, a flat roof can fit in.
Yes.
Thank you. So I did hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, any other questions for the gentleman? Thank you very much, Mr. McCrae. Madam Clerk?
Emil Nenninger?
Welcome, Mr. Nenninger.
Thank you.
Council looks forward to your information, and are you planning to use the overhead, or are you?
I am not, because I wasn't aware that it was available.
Okay.
It's quite a while since I've been to a council meeting, and I didn't know you had a neat little device like this, but
Well,
in any case...
We can have a heritage council meeting where we don't use our toys.
I'll just wait until the papers are distributed, but it's enough. Well, I'll start off. Your Worship, councilors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here, of course, on the same subject. I live on 2nd Street in number 80. I've been in that house for 42 years, which corresponds to, I just found out and realized, exactly 1/2 of my lifetime so far. I am a professional engineer, graduated from Queen's in 1950. I got a master's from McGill in 1951, and I was, after working for a few years, given a fellowship to study for a doctorate in engineering in Great Britain at Manchester University. As far as my career is concerned, I've been involved in consulting, mainly in consulting engineering. I have also been involved in the personal design of some gas separation plants which have been built in the United States quite a long time ago. In succession, I've been a vice president and on the board of 2 consulting engineering firms, which are the largest ones in Canada. I was a founding director and president of a national engineering society, and I've been partially retired for the last 20 years. Shortly after retirement, I was inducted as a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering. I'm also a co-inventor of a new process with my oldest son, and a new process to extract oil from oil sands. A plant is currently being built in Alberta to demonstrate this process. Now to 52nd Street. I'm sorry about all that, but my neighbors did ask me to talk a little bit about myself first. I simply want to say that the council must instruct the planning department and the Heritage Committee to reconsider their acceptance of the current proposal. The handout I gave you concentrates on the one issue. There are all other kinds of issues that have been already explained in detail, and I'm kind of repeating the one that I feel is the most glaring, and that is the massing of the proposed addition to the house. I'm just going to get my own copy here. If you look at the first picture, which is a view of the current house with the sun porch attached on the south side. This is the south elevation looking northeast with sun porch to be removed. Then if you look at the next drawing, which shows a plan view of the site and the impact marked in green of the new addition to this existing heritage house. The new addition is approximately twice as large as the existing house. I just don't understand how that could have been approved. And if you look at the last diagram, that is the view from the south that the neighbor would see once this project is completed, compared to the picture in the first piece of paper that I gave you. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that the proposal should be sent back for reconsideration by both the Heritage Committee and the Planning Committee, who prepared the Heritage Rules, the 62 pages, the document that Jamie McRae showed. I was going to bring a copy of that here and waive it, but I left it at home in my rush to get out of the house, so it's not here.
Dr. Nininger, I wonder, would you mind, with technical assistance, perhaps putting the photo on the camera stand so that we can
Okay.
show the public what you were talking about? That looked interesting enough to try to give the public a shot of it too. And that's the rear with the sunroom that you were sun porch that you were speaking of.
Right.
Thank you for that. Please go ahead.
Well, I think I'm pretty well through. All I can say is that I believe that somehow things went wrong. One thing I would like to indicate is that I'm aware that because of illness and because of travel, 2 of the members of the Heritage Committee were unable to attend that last Heritage meeting. So there was only one person present, Jamie McCrae, who was able, or who did vote against the proposal. I'm very concerned, though, in general, by the fact that it seems like the citizens of the heritage areas are represented by a minority on that committee. Somehow that doesn't sound right. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Before you go, perhaps you could put the picture back up. I'd like to ask you a question about it.
Okay, which one is that? The porch?
Yes, please. When I heard you say you'd been there for 42 years, I thought you might be able to help us understand how that got on there, because that doesn't look like it's a heritage item.
It was built in 1950. So it was ahead, in other words, it's 62 years old.
So this Florida porch, as I wanted to call it,
Yeah,
might have attained heritage status.
yeah,
I'm speaking lightly.
okay.
All right, so that went on in 1950. I don't think we had any controls in those days.
Oh,
So thanks very much for helping us with that.
you're welcome.
Appreciate your time tonight. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
And that would be Beth Rose.
Welcome, Ms. Rose.
Thank you.
Council looks forward to your information and your summing up, I think you said you wanted to do.
Summing up, finally, last but not least. Can you hear me fine with this position? Good evening, Your Worship, the Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Beth Rose, and I have lived at 41 2nd Street, directly across from subject property for 15 years. By way of background, my ancestors were United Empire Loyalists and some of the original settlers to Oakville in the early 1800s. My roots here go very deeply, and I have a strong respect, appreciation, and love for our heritage homes and values, which affect the quality of my life every day as I walk through these neighborhoods. I would like to say how fortunate I feel to be able to speak here tonight and voice my concerns. I've entitled my presentation, Let Right Be Done. I will start by summarizing the facts we have heard here tonight. Fact number 1, we have heard tonight again and again how this addition is not in compliance with the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District bylaw, and therefore is a violation of same. It is contemporary and modern and is not sympathetic or compatible to the historic home as required by the district plan. Furthermore, it does not meet 2 of the provincial guidelines in that it is not physically and visually compatible with or subordinate to the historic home. It definitely meets the 3rd requirement of being distinguishable, but does not conserve the heritage value and character-defining elements of the historic home. This bylaw violation is clearly a precedent, and we need to acknowledge it as that. Fact number 2, we have consulted with a recognized heritage expert who has reviewed this submission. He saw no evidence that widely accepted best practices have been employed in this process. For example, neither a heritage impact assessment, including a list of character-defining attributes and values, or a conservation plan have been conducted for 52nd Street. This widely accepted best practice is in place in Milton, Burlington, and Mississauga. He states that, and I quote, there appears to be a need for updated procedures, and that these two documents, typically associated with heritage work, would have eliminated the numerous shortcomings which he details in his report. And I have a copy of this letter for each of you after the presentation. We earnestly request you review his submission before you vote on this proposal tonight. Shirley Oakville, who has won awards and even tonight bestowed awards for our dedication to heritage principles, should be employing state-of-the-art best practices. Fact number 3, there has definitely been an unauthorized change in interpretation of heritage guidelines that has not been properly communicated to residents. We are not placing blame, but there are new faces in town planning and there is a lack of continuity and history. The planning manager has only been in his role for 10 months and can't possibly be expected to be as steeped in our neighborhood history as the residents, many of whom have lived on the street for 30 to 60 years. There is definitely a disconnect here, or why else would residents be protesting? From the pictures shown here tonight, you can see that there are no other contemporary additions or builds since the heritage guidelines came into effect in 1988. This proposal would set a dangerous precedent. This change in interpretation and disconnect needs to be acknowledged. Fact number 4, there have been significant changes in the composition of the Heritage Committee in the past year. Recently, a senior, knowledgeable, and influential member of the committee, who always held fast to the district plan and heritage principles against opposition from architects, had to resign. There is no longer a requirement for heritage members to live in the Heritage District, and this is not in the best interest of heritage preservation. In the recent approval decision on 52nd Street, 2 members who were known to be sympathetic and supportive of heritage values were absent. Only one of the 5 voting members at this meeting actually lives in a heritage district, and he voted to deny the proposal. We respectfully believe that there is a lack of education regarding heritage best practices and the heritage guidelines on this vital committee. Fact number 5, residents are clearly in opposition to this proposal, which is not in keeping with the neighborhood streetscape. Since this process began, 16 letters have been written to the town, and we have attended 2 heritage meetings and 2 council meetings to protest. Is this not cause for concern when you are overriding residents' objections? We only have a handful, and I repeat, a handful of streets in Oakville that are protected by this historic bylaw. And yet here we are fighting valiantly to protect this streetscape, but our cries fall on deaf ears. It bears mentioning that recently, Heritage Committee approved 2 other applications on 2nd Street, and there are no concerns about these approvals since they are sympathetic, compatible, and subordinate to the homes. I would like to turn now to what I call the soft issues in this case. In the recent newspaper Beaver article on this controversial decision, there was a quote from one of our councillors about trying to educate residents on heritage matters. Again, respectfully, I would suggest that change management does not occur by making major shifts in interpretation to an historic bylaw in isolation and without neighborhood consultation and input. Shock, surprise, and consternation about major changes in bylaw interpretation and last-minute, backdoor notification the night before a precedent-setting proposal is about to be approved are not education and do not show respect for residents. All residents would like to formally welcome the Wilks to the neighborhood and let them know that we welcome appropriate change. Our frustration is that we've been clearly making our wishes known for months now, stating how strongly we feel that the heritage guidelines should be respected. No one can understand why people would be drawn to such an historic area and yet not wish to uphold the bylaw, not to mention the charm and character of our beautiful neighborhood. Residents feel powerless, frustrated, and unable to influence the town on this decision. One of our speakers at the Heritage meeting was told that he was not allowed to criticize town planning and told to stand down. We were then chastised and told that things couldn't stay the same, the neighborhood needed to evolve, and residents were not welcome to new ideas and new people. This intimidating approach does not encourage citizens to participate in the democratic process. I would reiterate that we welcome appropriate change which preserves the heritage aspects of the neighborhood. In this vein, I would mention that there have been a number of tasteful and sympathetic renovations in our neighborhood about which there have been no complaints or protests. This degree of resistance is highly unusual in this neighborhood and should speak volumes. Some residents on 2nd Street are elderly and infirm and are unable to be here tonight. They can't understand why the town would endorse such a proposal on the street where they have lived all of their adult lives and raised their families. Many residents are suspicious of the town's motives and feel they no longer have any input to the process, which will directly affect their neighborhood. One gentleman said to me, "Are we only here to pay property taxes but have no say in our own neighborhood?" Another said, "We thought we would have to move from our beloved home and neighborhood because we can no longer afford the property taxes. But sadly, this is just another reason to leave." A younger neighborhood said, "What is the point of even having heritage guidelines if they can be so easily disregarded by architects and new residents?" Finally, many other residents are away this week, but asked to be mentioned here tonight. They felt that writing any further letters would not be productive and have given up hope, confirming their belief that you can't fight City Hall, regardless of the merits of your case. I will close by acknowledging that as our democratic representatives, you have the power to uphold this bylaw, thereby preserving our heritage neighborhoods and protecting the charm and character that our residents so cherish. We appeal to your sense of right and wrong and ask that you let right be done. We request that this proposal be denied and that a heritage impact assessment and conservation plan be conducted by an expert, acceptable to all parties before any future proposals are considered. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your information. Are there questions for the delegation? Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I see that we have different proposals here over the few submissions that have been made. Have the residents at any time provided input as to what they'd like to see, and then these proposals have come, these new proposals? I think this has been changed. I think the previous speaker said it's been changed like 3 times already.
Yes, at least 3 times, yes.
And have the residents provided any input during that time?
Yes, yes, absolutely. On each, to the architect, you mean?
Architect or to the homeowners and what they'd like to see?
To the architect, and we've responded to the architect's.
And this has accommodated some of the concerns that you raised over the past submissions?
This is a which?
Have they accommodated those concerns that you raised?
They have made changes since their original proposal was denied. Yes.
And you agree with the previous speaker that they haven't come far along enough?
No, unfortunately. Well, you can look at the picture here. This is not sympathetic.
We wanted to know if you had input along the way. That's all.
Through the architects.
Yes.
Yes. Jill, can I give you my speech?
To assist you, perhaps keying off of the councillor, do you recall in your presentation talking about your words having fallen on deaf ears? Maybe if you were to explain whose ears were deaf, it would help council understand you better.
This was approved. This was approved. What we're looking at was approved. We've made it clear from the beginning that contemporary and modern, as those words were cited in the staff's plan, contemporary and modern, we have never seen contemporary and modern in our neighborhood.
So, are you aware that the Heritage Committee can't approve but only recommend to council?
We hope so.
Are you aware of that?
My belief is what I've heard is it's very difficult to change a recommendation once it comes to council. That's what I understood.
Well, I just want to be clear whether you think it's been approved yet or not.
It's been approved by Heritage, and my understanding is that...
So, do you have the agenda tonight? You notice it says, what in fact it says is that Heritage recommends it, not approve it.
That's our fondest wish and prayer for this.
Okay, so to the point about deaf ears, it seems to me that you're indicating that the Heritage Committee didn't agree with you, and that there was some division on the committee, So evidently, some of them agreed with you, right? At least one member who was here
yes, but it
appears
was-
to have agreed with you.
But unfortunately, the proposal was recommended for approval.
Very well, but I'm just trying to tease apart some of the rhetoric that may have set at least one counselor against you, and I wouldn't like that to happen. So I was just trying to help give you a chance to
Okay.
explain more better, you know, what you were
Our
trying to say.
understanding was that it was very difficult to have a proposal changed after it was recommended for approval by the Heritage Committee. That was my understanding.
Oh, well, I would resist. I would encourage you not to believe that.
I'm glad. I'm very glad to hear that.
Council has council makes the decision.
I'm very, 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 very glad to hear that.
Council makes the decision and council wears the decision.
I'm very glad to hear that, sir.
Okay, so Councilor Bird would like to ask you a question.
We've heard tonight, I guess, from you and at least one of the other delegates that we should have a heritage impact assessment, and you just handed out. Do you have any idea to how much that would be? How do we impose any peer review on what we have, assuming that's what we would come back, and how long it would take?
How long it would take?
Yeah, like what are, you're asking for us to provide, this is a missing link presumably.
Yes,
In council's decision-making, we have a recommendation, but we don't have a heritage impact assessment.
okay.
So my question is, okay, and you say before we make the decision, we should either have it before we make a decision, or we've had one delegate say, if we could make the decision, we have one anyway for
We would like,
future.
we would recommend that as part of just best practices on all heritage decisions, that a heritage impact assessment be employed.
Okay, what do they cost?
I believe
know?
they're $3,000 to $4,000, is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be sort of mandatory with the application that you must provide that?
Yes, that's the heritage experts' recommendation, that it's standard practice in the other municipalities that I mentioned.
We haven't done that, and who would pay for that? Presumably the applicant?
Presumably.
Then it would be argued that because they choose the person providing that, they would be less than objective, rather than the town having a sort of a peer review of work from their architect. I'm just trying to follow the process. The applicant would hire an architect, come forward with a proposal which they like, then hire somebody to do an impact assessment, which they pay for, to do a peer review of the architect's work.
At this point, I'm going to ask Boyd Waits, who's been in touch with the heritage expert. I think he's probably more qualified to answer that question. Would you like to?
Sorry, can you actually repeat the question?
Well, we're asked not to, presumably here, to not accept the decision of the Heritage Review Committee, because somehow along the process is not following what other municipalities do, and they're having a heritage impact assessment. Now my question is, if we delay the process, have the heritage assessment processed, then is that at the same time, and that's what you're calling for, who pays for that?
Okay,
The applicant?
I think in this case, a heritage impact assessment would be warranted, because we obviously have significant disagreements between neighbors, the OLRA, even the committee, the architects, the owners, and as to who pays for it, I'm not sure. I'm presuming that would probably be the owners.
The applicant or the objectors?
Yeah. The objectors certainly could in this case. And going forward, we're asking that the town consider a review of the process. And one of the things that we would like the town to consider is whether or not it's appropriate to have a heritage impact assessment done.
What trumps then the Heritage Review Committee? The impact assessment or their recommendation?
Obviously, it would have to go back to the Heritage Review Committee for their analysis of what that assessment is.
Yeah. Well, the term best practice, I'm prepared to have best practice and come back, but I don't know how we can put the applicant through more and more costs and hoops if at the end of the day, you're having a
Well, I
peer
think-
review of their own architect, which
Yeah,
to the satisfaction of someone else who basically could end up saying, I object anyway.
I think actually in this case, if there was a heritage impact assessment, there was kind of an independent consultant doing that work, that residents and the OLRA would be happy with whatever the results are.
Okay. I think you understand my point. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the clarification. For the public, who, if they had any difficulty with that, the notion of the heritage impact assessment would be in order to produce a conservation plan, which would then be used to guide the rest of the process in terms of preserving the heritage features that were identified in the impact assessment. So,
Well, it'd be an
so
assessment
what's
whether in
contemplated is a
fact,
bit more of a chain of steps, I guess.
but we already have that. They come out of the guidelines. I'm just saying that now you're holding the guidelines up, having somebody assess to say whether this particular application falls within the acceptable level. Now, we have a staff opinion, but we have never had basically an independent paid for by presumably the applicant or the town that I'm aware of on an individual application.
That's right, and the good news for everyone is having or not having an HIA and having or not having a conservation plan aren't before us tonight, only whether or not we accept the recommendation of the committee. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through your worship to staff, maybe they can clarify whether in fact a heritage impact analysis is required for this particular application.
Perhaps the commissioner would like to start off then.
Mayor, members of the committee, the submission requirements are included in the application form. There's a pre-consultation requirement. Through that pre-consultation process, it would identify whether or not there were any further studies. In this particular case, there was not a further study identified. The role of heritage staff is to provide that assessment on the basis of the district plan that's in place that's identified the attributes to be protected. And that, of course, is reviewed by the Heritage Committee, and also then is in front of council for its decision.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Is that every registered? Oh, is Jeff Roche and Terry Martino here? Come on down. Are you Jeff?
Yes.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information. Jeff is with the architect, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, council looks forward to your information.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Jeffrey Roche, and I'm an architect at Gren Weiss Architect and Associates, and I'm here representing our clients, Eileen and Bob Wilkes, the owners of 52nd Street. Eileen and her daughter Erin are present here tonight, along with Terry Martino, who is another architect from our office. We are here in support of Staff and Heritage Oakville's recommendation for 52nd Street, and to answer any questions that your worship or council may have with respect to this application. Much time was spent by the Heritage Committee on the details and merits of this application at the Feb 14th meeting, and the decision was almost unanimous in support of the application. With this in mind, however, we can present again any information previously presented if council so chooses. So the following, I can repeat basically what went before Heritage Committee. So, can I continue?
You certainly may.
As many of you know, the Wilks, along with myself, Terry Martino, and Gren Weiss, have been working closely with the Heritage staff since July 2011 on plans to update and restore the property on 52nd Street. This is our third submission before Heritage today. We have worked hard with the Wilks to respect the character, history, and charm of the area and the community in the process. We have been open to change and accommodation and have been consultative and respectful of the Heritage process and the concerns of the community. We do understand the inevitable differences of opinion that arise when change is contemplated, and for this reason, the town has established guidelines to help direct the process. As alluded to in the report by Heritage staff for this submission and on our previous submission on December 16th, 2011, the merits of the proposal are compelling and not only satisfy but exceed the requirements for the additions and renovations as set out in the Oakville Heritage Kit. I'd like to start...
Before you,
Sorry.
Jeff, I don't think you can, in 10 minutes, go through all of this material, so maybe I've misled you by inviting you to start reading it all. Let me ask instead if there's anything you'd like to say in addition to your written material, which council will be able to look at. Or highlights, but just be sensitive to the time.
Yeah, maybe I could just highlight the first couple pages with it and skip through a lot. I'd like to start by highlighting the provincial heritage guidelines and the specific heritage categories outlined for the district in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District Conservation Plan and how they relate to new work versus restorative work. This info sheet published by the Ontario government lists the 8 guiding principles in the conservation of built heritage properties. It states, the following guiding principles are ministry statements in the conservation of built heritage properties and are based on international charters which have been established over the century. These principles provide the basis for all decisions concerning good practice in heritage conservation around the world. Principles explain the why of every conservation activity and apply to all heritage properties and their surroundings. Pointing specifically to item 7, legibility, it says, new work should be distinguishable from old. Buildings or structures should be recognized as products of their own time, and new additions should not blur the distinction between old and new. The Oakville Heritage Application Criterion reads similarly. New work should be distinguishable from the old structure. Building additions and new construction should be recognized as products of their own time, and new additions should not blur the distinction between old and new by attempting to duplicate. Strive for complementary additions, not replicas of the existing building. The recent 2011 report on the proposed downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District also states, the town of Oakville and consulting team recognize that contemporary building, technology, and architecture all have a place in successful conservation districts, and will seek to ensure new initiatives will not be stifled. Replication of historic building stock will not be required. Conservation districts are the result of many years of change and development. Each era or decade brings in new architectural styles, building materials, and technology. In the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District Conservation Plan, there are also specific categories and guidelines for new work versus restorative work. It is important not to distort the context of these guidelines and categories, and specifically the distinction between what is new work and what is existing restorative work. Category 1 buildings display important architectural elements and contribute to the historical character of the area, and they are classified as important buildings, and redevelopment should adapt and include significant architectural elements found on the building. Although the owners respect and like the existing home, unlike Category 1 buildings, 52nd Street is a Category 2 building, and as such, its architecture is not suggested to be as important or valuable. Rather, it is deemed compatible with the area and contributes to the district's contextual significance. Before I list some of the accommodations that have been made in the latest submission in response to the neighbors, I would like to show the site plan and some pictures of the rear yard of 52nd Street. Some of the revisions to accommodate the neighbors' concerns were made even though the rear yard is well planted along the property lines. If you were to tour the property, you would see that there is approximately 20-foot high cedar hedge that runs a good length of the south lot line. The hedge is jointly owned and will hide most of the south facade of the new addition. On the north side, there's a 20-foot high portion of cedar hedge, which makes views from the north neighbor equally difficult. There's limited visibility from Union Street. The rear yard is hidden by a wood privacy fence, detached garage, and the depth of the addition on 52nd Street. Mr. and Mrs. Wilkes purchased this property knowing and wanting to respect the existing heritage home, but also knowing that the zoning allowed for an increase of the existing gross floor area to approximately 4,000 square feet, which is consistent with many of the homes in the area. In addition, the zoning allowed for a generous garage where currently the property has no garage. It is interesting to note on the site plan that the footprint of the existing house is not much bigger than the double garage of the neighbor to the north at 56 2nd Street. The following are the concessions that were made to the design in response to neighbor feedback. We've been through this several times, so I don't think I'll skip over the nine concessions that were made for the neighbors. Further, there was specific guidelines for the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District Conservation Plan that are more specific to new additions. The first of these recommendations falls under the heading Scale and Mass. The document reads, maintaining compatible scale and mass is encouraged. Alterations and additions may be built to complement the proportions of the structure. In architectural terms, proportion, scale, and mass are relative terms. Scale is not the same as size, but refers to relative size as perceived by the viewer. Likewise, mass can be referred to as the physical bulk of a building relative to its context, as perceived by the viewer. Both scale and mass are relative from the perspective of the viewer. And in the context of a heritage district, the streetscape is usually the primary determinant of scale and mass relative to the viewer. A plan drawing is an abstract determinant of scale and mass, and therefore not usually used to determine this. The addition of 52nd Street was carefully designed so that scale and mass were compatible with the proportions of the existing structure. The addition was set back, the height is subordinate, and clearly the addition defers to the square-like building mass of the existing structure, as mentioned in the staff report. The addition was designed as a 1.5 story to clearly give precedence to the 2.5 story existing home from the street perspective. I think I'd just like to summarize. In summary, in reviewing the merits of this proposal, it is important to consider the specific guidelines set out in the Oakville Heritage Kit. Grenweiss Architects is a well-known and respected firm in the Oakville area, having been involved in numerous heritage projects over the last 25 years. We feel strongly that the proposal before us today not only meets but exceeds the criteria set out in the heritage guidelines. The addition is within the zoning bylaw for this larger lot size and requires no minor variances. The setback and roof lines of the new addition are subordinate and sympathetic to the historic proportions of the existing structure. New work on the addition is a product of its own time and is distinguishable to the existing heritage home. Further, we are proposing extensive restoration to the existing structure. The wood, windows, the soffit, the trim, to bring the charm and grandeur back to this beautiful home. Thank you. Terry Martino and myself would be happy to address comments or questions.
Thank you very much, you did a wonderful job of editing because you fit your time perfectly, despite my interruption of you. So, well done. Questions? Councillor Milgram.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you have a picture of the design you want to do on your slide deck here?
Is that it?
Which part of it?
That's not the design of the house you're right in front of us.
Yes, it is. This is the existing home.
Okay. It looks quite different when I saw the picture of what you're proposing. then what I saw earlier
They were
didn't
showing-
look like this house.
Yes.
What am I missing?
Because the neighbors that were here were concentrating on the rear of the house, which is very hard to see from the street or from anywhere really because of the hedges, which I could have gone on about. But basically, this is the view from the front, which is the view of the existing house being restored in all manners. All the windows are being restored to the original. The trim work, all the aluminum is being replaced. So we're restoring the existing dwelling, and the existing addition is off to the side, which comprises of a two-car garage with the dormer window above it and a larger stair window.
So from the street, this is exactly what the house will look like?
Yes.
And the driveway down the side of the house is on the right-hand side of the house, or is that?
Yes.
How am I reading that? Do you have any other pictures, views you could show us that you have with you? Being the architect, I'm sure you must.
I actually thought Carolyn would be doing a presentation. I might have it on this.
This does help me because everything,
You know what I do?
I might have been missing when I was looking at the pictures, thinking that was this view from the street, what I was seeing earlier tonight, and that this is quite different.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. So that's the same view from the front. So you can see the existing house. The garage is off to the side. To the left side, and there's a window between the house and the garage, which is basically the stair window. So it goes from the one story to the next.
There was some concern regarding the windows. Is there, could they be changed to be more in sympathy with the windows of the house itself?
The windows, with respect to the front elevation, are what? The windows with respect to the front elevation are very similar to what's on the existing house. There's existing double hung windows in the cottage split design, which is the 1/1, and we're repeating the proportions in the new addition, and their Munton pattern repeats the proportions of the existing double hung windows.
Simple things like the one over the garage, that people were asking for a dormer window similar to the house. So they pointed that out. If you're looking at it from the, would that be something simple that could be done? Trying to understand, the people are going to live here, and everybody wants to get along. And I'm trying, something simple to make this work for everyone.
Councillor, you're a wonderful guy with many, many talents, but we're starting to do architecture by committee now, which is a little scary.
Not a bad idea sometimes. Sorry about that, but I'm just wondering, and with what you've heard tonight, whether you could say, yeah, we could probably tune that up.
We have changed that particular window several times. Once was after feedback from the neighbors asking that it be more proportional to the existing windows, and so that was done, and I think we achieved that.
Mr. Martino.
Yes, if I could. Thank you, Your Worship, members of Council. I guess through you, Your Worship, Councillor Elvers, there was great sort of care taken to try to replicate, as you see the existing windows, this being the existing house and the existing dormer, or at least bay window on the second floor. And you can see that sort of proportion of the transom and the way that that's divided. There was great care taken to sort of replicate that. Those windows above the garage there are an exact proportion to the ones in the bay. To answer your question, on the streetscape side. So.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, but you might not wander too far because there's a question or two more coming. Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much. I just want to give you an opportunity to clear something up, and it just struck me when you said it. You said that there was at the rear there was hedges and trees that hide most of the structure. And I trust you're not suggesting that something can be incompatible and then be hidden and meet our markers. So if you just want to elaborate on that.
Through you, Your Worship. No, Councillor, there was no intention whatsoever. Clearly in Jeff's presentation, he's simply pointing out of the sort of growth in the backyards, and that the addition is not seen as in a streetscape, which is its primarily view to the public on 2nd Street. So any of the views in the rear yard to the existing house would be through a private cross neighbor backyard private property, and not the public streetscape, which the Heritage District is mostly concerned with.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to clear that up. The other thing is that, and going back to what Councillor Elgar was saying, I think the most contentious issue is the rear of the house. You don't have any pictures of that because it looks vastly different from the way you've presented it. Okay, just looking at that right now, and Jeff said that the application satisfies and exceeds the conditions of Heritage Oakville. And there was 3 issues that were raised today, and hopefully you can comment on all 3 of them. One was, and Councillor Elgar raised this as well, was the size and location of the windows, the zinc material, and the slope or the lack thereof of the roof. Can you comment why you believe that's compatible, the 3 of them? Start with the windows first.
Okay. As you can see in the rear of the house, the existing mass of the existing dwelling is there. This is an addition of the bay window in the back, and to our way of thinking, it's not unlike your patio doors. There are large panes of glass. They are common. I believe there was a picture shown here referred to as the 1950s sunroom that was put on, and traditionally speaking, the back of the house, you would have larger panes of glass, not unlike sliding doors that would open to your patio. Similarly, in the addition, that is the intention, to enjoy the backyard and the views, which we don't believe is inconsistent. With respect to the zinc cladding, zinc is a natural material. It's not any different really once it tones down to copper, which is prevalently used throughout the historical district. And it is used, I think, perhaps there was some misnomer, is that the proposal seeks in the existing roof, as well as the whole streetscape side, that the roofing material is of cedar shingles, and that the zinc is used on the dormers, which is not unlike many of the copper dormers that we've done. I believe there was a picture shown of 71 First Street, which I did a number of years back, with plenty of copper roofs on it, and they're generally used as articulating elements on small dormers and such, but they're not the main mass of the roof material. And so in that way, we believe that it's consistent with the sort of detailing of the neighborhood.
If you can lastly comment on the slope of the roof that the mayor was also raising earlier.
I believe, yes, the slope of the roof, perhaps if we go back to the front. This perhaps could be an interesting diagram for council to see. This being the existing roof, this is a roof plan, and this is the existing dwelling. And as you see from the streetscape, everyone believes that it's a completely sloped roof, but it in fact has a big square section on the top of it. So it is a heritage building in the 1920s with a flat roof. This would be 2nd Street elevation, where I've put the pen. And as you can see, this addition with containing the garage has the slope roofs. These slope roofs are taking the exact pitch from the existing roof. And towards the rear, not unlike, I believe, at 52nd Street, a picture that was shown, that it is common to have flat roof additions in the heritage area, the house immediately north of this property. There was a picture shown. So as you can see on the 2nd Street elevation, the front elevation, again, this is the mass of the existing dwelling. This roof is the exact tip roof, the exact slope of the roof. It is brought down, and again, all of this is 100% cedar shingles, you know, in keeping with the guidelines and the roofing material, which is consistent. This dormer here is zinc. There was a lot of, again, it's a sort of architectural element very commonly used on dormers or projections as a detail.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? Councillor? Well, I guess I'll try one more question then. Something one of you said, I think it was Mr. Roche, you talked, or maybe both of you actually raised this point. You talked about the Category 2 in the Heritage District, the values that we're most concerned about are this contextual discussion. And there was a suggestion that it's the streetscape that is the weightiest part of that, and that the rear, especially if it can't be seen, can't be construed as a streetscape contextual element. Or there was a suggestion that it wasn't as great a contextual element. So I guess I have two questions. Did I hear that right?
Yes, I believe.
Okay. And second, does it follow then that what this turns on is the importance of the rear? Or at least is that your impression of what this turns on?
No, Your Worship. I don't necessarily believe so. I believe it is of an issue. I believe obviously it's of great concern to the neighbors who sort of leave the picture up and keep talking about the rear, and really don't look at the sort of streetscape proposal and its sort of compatibility as the district plan talks about as a sort of idea of the vernacular of the neighborhood.
Right. So to try again and maybe frame it better, what you want us to hear is that in your view, by respecting the streetscape with what you've shown us here, you've met the district requirements. And I think we heard a lot of evidence from the neighbors that they seem especially to be concerned about what they showed us, most of which was from the rear. So the division between you seems to be on those lines. Is that your impression?
Clearly, the residents are always interested in the back and use that as an example of the sort of modern architecture, at least the size or the incompatibility of it. We believe that the front elevation is the public view. Traditionally speaking, that is the one which the public sees, which most of the emphasis put on. I believe the guidelines through the 22 years that I've been in front of the Heritage Review Committee take most seriously. Mm-hmm. But we do believe that it meets the provincial policies in the way that the heritage guidelines are to be applied in these days, in that additions, the house is being restored, but additions should be a product of their own time. And I can tell you from that experience of the 22 years that we have been working and appearing before Heritage Review, greater emphasis, certainly with staff and the Heritage Review Committee, has always been on the streetscape, the public aspect in view.
Okay, thank you very much. I found that helpful. Councillor Elgar.
Sorry, I should have asked you earlier, just for clarification. You mentioned, Mr. Roach, that it would be different if it was a Category 1, but this is a Category 2. What would you do if it was a Category 1 differently?
We wouldn't treat it much differently. I'm just pointing out because some of the neighbors like to go on about the historical significance of this building and how everything should be replicated in the detail. The guidelines spell out that if it is a Category 1 building, that replication of the existing building details are to be to be taken, to be dealt with more replication of the existing sort of heritage details. But for Category 2 buildings, their significance is only in that is contextual to to the neighborhood, basically. It's not the architectural detail in the building is not as significant, and that's the distinction between Category 2 and Category 1 buildings in the guidelines.
Would that make a difference for the addition on the building then, if it was a Category 1? Would that come into play?
It could. I'm not sure that reading the guidelines, it not necessarily would, but I think that if it was a Category 1 building, I'm not sure that our office would treat the addition the same way necessarily.
Maybe if I could, perhaps if I could clarify. When the district plan was done in '88, this house was identified as a Category 2, and the purpose of it was as Category 1s were things like Ericless Estate, which were just absolutely perfect examples of architecture and finely detailed and should be preserved at all costs. And the district plan actually goes on to say there's actually a Category 3 house, which was sort of an infill and done at a time which, for all intents and purposes, says could be removed from the heritage plan. This was a Category 2, and it really was only of interest because it was vaguely representative of the vernacular of the area. That is to say, it sort of had this shape, this dimension, wasn't particularly wonderfully architectural like an Ericless with great details, and therefore it didn't make the Category 1.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your information. I hope council found it helpful. I'd like to ask staff, we heard a number of representations about changes to staff's conduct of heritage, and I wonder, there were several suggestions that we've changed the interpretation of the district and so on. I wonder if we could have some feedback from staff. I think council would find it valuable to get some context from the staff on those particular points that were raised.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things, and we do have a presentation by Carolyn, which hopefully will provide you with a staff presentation on the changes that have been made.
I think this would be a good time for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we'd be happy at that point to answer questions from council.
Okay, through you, Your Worship and members of council, you just have to bear with me. I need to bring up a presentation that we did to Heritage Oakville. I thought it might be a little more informative. Okay, so I'll just try to go through this briefly. There's a lot of details in this presentation. As you know, there were two similar applications that were submitted by the applicants in 2011. These were both denied by council. So changes were made to address the concerns of staff, of the Heritage Committee, and residents as well, to deal with those concerns. And so the applicants then submitted the application that you see before you today. And so now staff has recommended approval, and the Heritage Oakville Committee has recommended approval as well. So this is just an overview of what was applied for. I'll just go through some photos of the house. This is the rear elevation. The side elevation on the north, and this is the elevation you've seen with the sun porch to be removed. And this is just another view from the front elevation. So a part of the application was to restore the original house. So I'll just take you through that. This is a photo of the house in 1987, and then as you see today, and then the proposal. So you do see changes in the windows. Without getting into too much detail, what you see in the far left in 1987 is what we believe to be the original windows. The wood windows underneath are 1/1 that were described earlier, the cottage style, and the panes that you see on that picture are actually the storm windows on top of the original windows. So in the 2011 photo you see, those are actually the vinyl windows replicating the original storm windows. What the applicants are proposing to do today is to replicate the original interior windows, which are the 1/1 windows, which would be seen normally when the storm windows are off. And just to note, the bottom windows that you see are actually still original. They've been maintained, and they will be maintained as part of this application. The roof, it's been asphalt, and they're proposing cedar, as was pointed out. And also the fascia and soffits, earlier up to the 80s were wood, and they were replaced with aluminum in probably the early 90s. So the applicants are actually recommending to go back to wood. So that would be another restoration component of the application. And again, this just gives a closer detail of the windows you can see. It's hard to see, but the 1/1 windows are underneath the wood storm windows. So this is just comparison between the December 2011 submission, which was the most recent submission, and the current one. So you can see there's quite a difference in terms of the rear section of the new addition. It's been brought back quite a bit. So this is 2nd Street along the right. It's a site plan of the first floor elevation, or floor plan rather. And again, just showing the section at the rear that was brought back to address neighbor concerns and also just to address the concerns of the large footprint of the building. This is the 2nd floor, and again, a 2nd-story deck was minimized, so it's quite a small deck now. And the roof plan, you can see again the section that was minimized. And this area of the roof was also cleaned up a little bit. This is the front elevation. This window here was brought down. This window is different in terms of the size compared to the original house. The proportions are the same, however, as the bay windows, the original ones. And this window kind of acts as a breezeway, a separation between the original brick structure and the new addition. So while it is a different size, there's no requirements in the guidelines for the new windows on the new addition to replicate the original windows in the original house. The guidelines ask that if you're replacing windows in the original portion, that you replace the windows in kind. That doesn't necessarily apply to the new addition. But what they've done is they've taken the proportions in this, and just put it on a different scale, and again it acts as that sort of delineation between the two sections. This small window here was removed just to deal with some of the concerns that it was maybe too much of a contemporary look. And this dormer window, which has been discussed, they took what was before larger one-pane windows and they replicated the original wood windows in the bay, and so that look has been mirrored there. And again, the roof, which on the top image you see was proposed to be zinc, they actually are now proposing cedar shingles to match what they're going to be putting on the original house as well. And this is just another view of it. Now, the one part of the application is the cladding. Whoops, I'll go back. The applicants have proposed that the original house be painted white to match the white wood cladding on the new addition. Staff, as you can see in the recommendation in your agenda, actually recommended that this portion not be approved, and Heritage Oakville recommended that as well. So we're recommending approval of the application subject to the original house not being painted white over the brick. So the images you see here, these sketches, they're not exactly the correct details in terms of what Heritage Oakville approved. So this is the south elevation, comparing what was done in December and today. Again, it's been brought back. The windows have been minimized to deal with some neighbor concerns and concerns of Heritage that the windows were too large, so these are a lot smaller. Again, all new windows are wood, even if they're not replicating the original details of the original house, they are all wood, so they're not vinyl or aluminum. And again, this dormer was changed as the front dormer was to replicate the original wood windows. So to the rear elevation, again, this section has been changed, and it's a little difficult to see in the elevation view just because you can't understand the depth, the change of the rear elevation. So this gives you an idea of the changes. So a section was brought off the back. And here we have the north elevation. So again, it's smaller at the rear. And this window, which was a large window, has been covered over in cladding. I think partly that was to deal with some neighbor concerns of privacy. So just to go over the changes, on the original house, the removal of the 1960 sunroom is proposed, as well as a rear mudroom that is existing. Staff had no concerns with those, as they're not considered major heritage components of the house. The second is the replacement of the front porch. The front porch that's there today is not original. It's sort of a replica of an earlier one. Again, they're looking at doing a very similar porch, just changing the roof line a bit. So staff had no concerns with that. The windows, the fascia, the soffit, and the roofing will all be restored to the wood windows and cedar shingles. So staff was very supportive of that. And then the last component was to paint the brick white, which staff and Heritage Oakville have not recommended approval of. Then with the new addition is set back. It's got a lower roof line. The historic elements of the original house have been maintained in the hip roof and in the window design. The materials are considered to be complementary. The addition is to be wood cladding siding. Zinc material, as was described, is a natural material, more like copper. It's not sort of a vinyl or aluminum material, which wouldn't be considered for the heritage districts. The windows are to be wood again, and the shingles on the roof are to be cedar. So staff found that the proposed work is considered to be in keeping with the district plan guidelines. That's first and foremost the guidelines that we look at. While we do consider provincial guidelines as well, the First and Second Street District Plan is the first group of guidelines that we look at. And so that's what we're comparing it with, and that's what we've considered. And we find that it is in keeping with those guidelines. The heritage elements are to be conserved as part of these guidelines. So staff has looked at this and found that the elements are being conserved and actually being restored in the original house. In terms of the new addition, the scale, design, and massing is considered to be sympathetic to the original house and compatible with it. It echoes features of the original house, but still deferring to it. So this was our full recommendation, which I don't think has changed too much since Heritage Oakville made the recommendation as well, but that final recommendation is in your agenda. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you. I just have a question with respect to painting the brick. The way the recommendation is, it suggests that they can paint that house any other color but white. Is that your intention, or is your intention that they don't paint the brick, period?
Through your worship, it was that it was not be painted white. It's not to say it can be painted any other color. The concern was that the painting of the house was to sort of modernize the house to match the new addition, and we want the original red brick to be maintained. There are some concerns with deterioration in the brick, so it's not to say that nothing could ever be put on that brick if there are some concerns with that deterioration, but we wanted to make sure that as proposed, it was not approved, so the painted white brick. So that's why it was put that way in the recommendation.
So would to follow up on the councillor, Part B of that, which requires them to come back and get approval for colors, would be your safety net for that?
That's correct. Well, actually, through your worship, I would think that if they were actually going to be painting the brick, even if it was a different color, it would actually come back to Heritage Oakville, because it's not just a matter of changing color, it's the painting of a masonry material. So that is considered significant enough that it would go back to Heritage Oakville. These kinds of details in terms of painting would more apply to the wood cladding or any trim.
All right, thank you for clarifying. Any others? Councillor Elgar, did you have any more questions?
No, I was just concerned about from the back, the slope of the roof being the extremely flat roof, and you're fine with that? There's nothing in the category that will prevent that?
No, through your worship, there's no concern with the flat roof. It is to the rear, and not to say we don't look at the rear, we do look at all elevations in the district. However, the section that is next to the heritage building that you see the most is at the front elevation, and they've echoed that hip roof. So that's where we have our major concern. The rest of the addition stretches back from the house, so it wouldn't be just right next to it. It wouldn't be adjacent to it like the garage is. So that was where our primary concern with the roof is.
Thank you.
All right, Council. Any other questions? Then thank you, Carolyn, for the presentation, and I'll look for a motion. Councillor Duddick?
I would move the recommendation from Heritage Oakville for approval.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? And that carries. That brings us to, I think, I'm sure that Councillor Duddick included the remainder of the minutes be received, right? So that'll bring us to discussion item number 1, the Economic Development 2011 Annual Report, to which we have been looking forward. And our director, Dorothy St. George, deserves your attention now.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Good evening, members of council. It's a pleasure to present to you tonight the 2011 annual report from the Economic Development Department. I actually have a lot of great news to share with you regarding Oakville's business community in 2011. My presentation will cover last year's non-residential development, Oakville's competitive position relative to 25 municipalities in the GTA, our progress on major departmental initiatives, and a glimpse of what is coming forward in 2012. And I'll start with 2011. Last year's development activity can be summarized in 3 short words. Oakville is office. And this statement signals the type of projects that led the development in 2011. 3 major office developments, 325,000 square feet of new development, making room for 2,200 jobs. Office development is important to Oakville. It provides opportunities for new investment in our target knowledge-based industries, as well as new employment that aligns well with the skill set of the town's residents. This map shows the location of the 3 new office sites. You've no doubt seen some of the construction in progress as you drive along the Queen Elizabeth Way. Number 1 in the east is the location of a new 115,000 square foot office building being constructed by First Gulf. It will house the Canadian headquarters for Siemens Canada. Siemens is a demonstrated leader in many industries, including energy, healthcare, and transportation. 800 employees from various municipalities will be consolidated in this location at the end of the year. Number 2, beside the Siemens site is the Joshua Creek Corporate Center, currently under construction by Carterra Private Equities. It will include 3 flex office buildings totaling 120,000 square feet. And realtors for this center have identified it as a prime location for professional and financial service companies, as well as IT and digital media firms. And number 3, in the west end at Burloak and south of the Queen Elizabeth Way, is the second phase of the Great Lakes Business Park by Paul's Properties. Phase 2 builds on the success of the first phase of development that attracted notable tenants such as Canadian Tire Financial Services, Delage Land and Financial Services, and Javelin Technologies. Phase 2 will provide another 90,000 square feet of office space for similar types of companies. This listing provides a snapshot of Oakville's largest employers by sector. The exciting news is that our top employers are growing. Firms such as Goodrich Landing Gear and Javelin Technologies are experiencing growth in their employment numbers. Pelmorix Media and Javelin are growing in facility size, with an addition underway at the Weather Network and the move to a larger facility by Javelin. We're lucky to have Ford Motor Company of Canada in our community, and with 3,500 employees, it, not surprisingly, continues to hold the #1 position of our top employers. We're also proud to have other top employers, including internationally recognized companies like Tim Hortons, AMEC, GE Water and Process Technologies. And if you count the companies on the list, we've actually added in an 11th company, the newcomer, Canadian Tire Financial Services, which is tied for 10th place. What's interesting about this list is the diversity among the town's economic base of companies, which comprises advanced manufacturing, food services, professional and financial services, and residential construction. This diversification helps to maintain a strong, stable local economy despite fluctuations in the global economy. Oakville has almost 16,000 companies providing 87,000 jobs, and the top employers account for approximately 10% of these jobs. Oakville companies keep making headlines in the news. It's no wonder this town's getting attention, including the recent visits by Premier McGuinty and Minister Kent. For example, there was a $3.3 million provincial investment by the province at Goodrich Landing Gear for R&D related to the development of more advanced and reliable landing gear systems. And I'm sure we are all happy as we get on planes to know that there are advanced and reliable landing gears. Actually, I'm going to go back just one. Another example is Ford, who announced a $2.5 million research initiative last year to develop powertrain systems for hybrid vehicles, and that's through a partnership with McMaster University and the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. PharmaTrust, who we know is the developer and manufacturer of prescription drug dispensing machines, received provincial approval for installation across Ontario hospitals last year. And a new applied research and collaboration center was opened at Sheridan Institute, providing a place for students and companies to collaborate on innovative solutions to company issues and initiatives. FedDev Ontario confirmed funding for these projects. And interestingly enough, PharmaTrust, who I just mentioned, is working with Sheridan on some of these projects. The common element in these headline stories is innovation. These companies are changing our world, and their work demonstrates the strength of our local business community. So now I'm going to move into the activity reporting for 2011. This chart shows the building permits that were issued for non-residential development. It's split between new construction in the top chart and alterations and improvements in the bottom. And I'd like you to focus on those two numbers in green. Over $100 million in new commercial construction and approximately $28 million in alterations. That's a lot of development. So to put these numbers in context, let's look at the 6-year trend. Here you see the annual construction value for commercial development from 2006 to 2011. You can see that $101 million and $28 million from the last chart are combined here in 2011 for a total of $129 million. This is a significant increase over the $46 million construction value in 2010. It's also well above the average for the last 6 years. I mentioned the 3 major office developments that contributed to this outcome. The other major driver is the construction of the GO Transit parking garage in Midtown, accounting for approximately $43 million in construction value. This is a look at our industrial development. In 2011, the annual construction value for all new development was approximately $18 million. And in comparison to 2010, this appears to be a major drop in activity. However, the majority of 2010 activity related to the construction of the transit facility. And if you factor that out, the 2010 number drops to about $5 million, which puts last year's results in a much more favorable light. previous two graphs identified construction value for non-residential development. This graph shows the square footage of construction. It clearly illustrates the surge in commercial development, reaching 1 million square feet in 2011. Even if you remove the square footage of the GO parking garage, there's still a major increase over 2010 levels. This may be a little hard to read, but if you just notice the red dots on the map, they identify some of the new companies that located in 2011. These are above the new construction that is underway. The cluster map shows the location of new companies, many of which are in Winston Business Park. Included is an international developer of pharmaceuticals called Watson Pharma, a new Cogeco data center in Winston Park, a startup digital media company called RenderWave, and a restaurant head office from Ottawa called The Works. Now, in the normal course of business, some companies will move for strategic reasons, and in 2011, 3 companies left Oakville, accounting for a loss of approximately 335 jobs. These included Pipeline Studios, who moved outside of the GTA to take advantage of a tax credit for film and animation. Becton Dickinson, a medical device distributor, consolidated offices in Mississauga, as did Pattison Outdoor. But overall in 2011, Oakville had a net growth in employment. Oakville's ability to attract non-residential development is an important factor in the town's economic sustainability. Land values, development charges, and taxes are 3 of the major costs that investors consider in their site selection analysis. So I'm just going to analyze how Oakville fares on each of these factors relative to 25 of the GTA municipalities. In 2011, Oakville's non-residential development charges moved from being the highest in the GTA in the previous year to being 9th highest for commercial and 2nd highest for industrial development. This change in ranking is attributed to rate hikes, indexing, and settlements in various municipalities. The annual report before you provides a detailed listing of rates across the 25 municipalities. But on the screen, you have just a summary showing the low, mid, and high ranges of rates for industrial and commercial development. Oakville's rate is the same for industrial and commercial, whereas some municipalities have lowered their industrial rates as an incentive for this type of development. For example, Ajax has an $8 industrial rate and a $22 commercial rate. Both Halton Region and Oakville will be implementing new development charge bylaws this year, and issues such as differential rates and conversion policies will be discussed as part of that process. The next competitive factor is land value. This bar graph shows commercial values in blue, industrial values in red, and if you read the chart from top to bottom, the values are shown for the 25 municipalities from the west in Halton to the east in Durham. Relative to other municipalities, Oakville is well positioned to compete on the basis of land values, particularly with respect to office development. The third competitive factor is taxes. Oakville's commercial rates are the 7th lowest in the GTA. Oakville's industrial tax rates are less competitive, but similar to GTA West municipalities. And there's a couple of things to note about taxes. First, Oakville's non-residential tax rates decreased in 2011 over 2010, which resulted in some savings for companies. For example, a large office development paying $700,000 in 2010 would have saved about $30,000 in 2011. My second point is that tax rates go hand in hand with the land values because the price of land affects the assessed value of a property. In making an investment decision, companies want to estimate the actual taxes they'll be paying on a new facility. And while they might find a comparable rate in 2 different municipalities, the value of the land may significantly change the taxes paid because it affects that assessment value. Oakville's competitive tax rates, coupled with competitive commercial land values, position Oakville as an attractive place for office development. Halton Region has just released an investment readiness and competitiveness study by Watson and Associates. This comprehensive document examined Halton's competitive position from a number of lenses. They analyzed different building sizes for industrial and commercial development, and they factored in development charges, construction costs, land values, developer profit, and tax rates to estimate an annualized cost of development per square foot. Their report notes that the office development is concentrated in Burlington and Oakville and has demonstrated strong growth in these municipalities. The conclusions in the Watson report echo what we've identified in our comparisons of competitive factors, namely that Oakville is well positioned for office development. It should be noted that cost factors are very important, but there are also other factors that impact a company's decision to locate. Oakville's enviable quality of life, talented workforce, proximity to markets, and the town's investment in infrastructure help Oakville maintain its attractiveness to companies and developers. There are 3 major initiatives in which staff were involved in 2011. The first is the proposed Life Sciences and Technology Park on the employment land surrounding the hospital. Last year, staff held a visioning workshop that provided a concept rendering for the proposed park, incorporating global best practices and feedback from the session. And an analysis was undertaken by Cushman & Wakefield regarding strategic investment for these lands. Staff will be reporting to Council this year regarding options and recommendations for these employment lands. The second initiative relates to Winston Park West, 250 acres of employment land at the QEW and Highway 403. In 2011, Halton Region approved the servicing of these lands based on the business case prepared by economic development staff. Our third initiative relates to the growth of the digital media sector, as identified in the town's economic development strategy. Staff have been working with Sheridan Institute, Haltech, and local companies to prepare a draft model for the development of this cluster. The strengthening of connections between the various stakeholders in this sector is helping the cluster to grow organically. And the 2012 collaboration with stakeholders will assist with the attraction of digital media companies to this area. So I began this presentation by talking about 3 new office developments that started in 2011 that will result in 325,000 square feet of new construction. So as we go through 2012, they will be nearing or will be completed. And we're at the end of February, and if we look ahead over the next 10 months, there are actually other projects coming forward. First Gulf will construct a 150,000 square foot office building in Midtown that will house PricewaterhouseCoopers. PwC will consolidate staff from several locations in this new office. And this is wonderful news for the redevelopment of Midtown. And lastly, a site plan application has been submitted by Carterra for a 6-story office tower adjacent to the Joshua Creek Corporate Center. I can tell you that all of these planning applications have the P&D team hard at work to ensure that the construction can commence in a timely manner. It's clear that the development from 2011 is indeed a good news story, and 2012 is shaping up to be another remarkable year for non-residential development in Oakville. And as I conclude my presentation, I would like to leave you with a quote that's contained in the annual report. It's an indication of what other people are saying about Oakville, and it shows the strength of this community as a place for investment and economic growth. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. And I know we've been working very hard on the PwC project, so it's terrific for you to be able to announce that in public tonight. So thank you very much for that. Any questions? Councillor Khan and Councillor Elger.
Thank you. You obviously have been looking at other municipalities and other cities and seeing what they're doing. I know that the City of Toronto has this program called the Gold Star program, where they take a member of staff and they're responsible or designated to a particular project from beginning to end, and it facilitates and it encourages businesses to come to the city. What can you suggest that other cities are doing that you've looked at and thought, you know, that's a really good idea? Oakville should be implementing that? I guess this is an opportunity for you to express your wish list.
Through you, Mayor Burton. Actually, we have been implementing something informally, and you will see more about that on a formal basis as we roll out our Gold Star program. We've got a new name for it, which will be coming forward. And in that, you're all familiar with the pre-consultation that takes place for development applications. And this program really takes a step backwards and has almost a pre-consultation. It's for companies who may not be as familiar with the development process as regular developers that are coming through for development applications. So it involves a meeting with planning, economic development, and building staff, and it provides that opportunity to sit down to welcome a company or a developer that's interested in investing in Oakville and to answer their questions, to identify any red flags that they should be aware of, and really to provide an opportunity in an informal setting to launch their idea and get things moving. And then that team, that investment readiness team, will really carry the project through as it goes through the regular pre-consultation and through the regular process.
Councillor?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was greatly appreciated. You did an excellent job. My question would be, when will we start seeing the numbers which will reflect the new hospital that is being built? Which that should kick in quite a large number, shouldn't it?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, I'm thinking the development, the number of square footage, the number of employees for the new Oakville Hospital. Would it show up on any of your indicators anywhere?
I think you're going to see a gigantic number in 2015.
That's what I wanted to know, when we're going to see that.
Through you, Mayor Burton, that is when we've been really tracking the private sector development, but as the hospital development is constructed and the staff are moved over to the new facility, you'll see numbers coming forward.
That would be great, because I think if you look at what you're trying to put industry around there, like type of offices you want and the type of industry you're trying to attract, I think that'll be very, very good to see that on the numbers. Another question is, what are we doing at the town of Oakville to try to get on an industry selector in North America? Like, what are we doing?
Through Mayor Burton, to get in front of site selectors, is that your question?
Yeah, so the companies in Europe or other places, they go to a site selector to find out what each town or city has that they're trying to attract. What are we doing in that regard?
Through you, Mayor Burton, there are a number of avenues that provide a lens into Oakville. So there are Ontario representatives, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade has representatives around the world. They are feeding leads into us. Sometimes they come in through a site selector, sometimes directly through the company, and they also come in through these particular avenues. The Greater Toronto Marketing Alliance is another organization that is out undertaking trade missions and bringing some of those leads forward to us. An example is I will be in Toronto tomorrow making a presentation to a Spanish pharmaceutical company that came through DFATE and GTMA, and they are considering investment in the Toronto, Oakville, Burlington area.
That's encouraging, because my next question is going to be, do you see any value in the GTAMA?
Through you, Mayor Burton. Well, that's a difficult question to answer, because when you're looking at outcomes, we haven't specifically seen any leads come through to fruition in Oakville. That's not to say they aren't doing a fair job, and I think there have been, they have brought new investment into the Toronto area, not specifically to Oakville.
I appreciate your honesty on that. Thank you.
Our staff are always honest with this. Councillor Adams.
Just to follow up to the question about the hospital, don't we see the building permit values showing up before 2015? And we'll see the employment, the full-time employment change then, but just like you see the other office development that's not yet completed, but we've already seen it in the building permit process. We'll see those numbers, won't we?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, you will be seeing those numbers coming forward.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
I've got two more, Councillor Bird and then Councillor Demoff.
Thank you. I guess watching too much TV and Dave Letterman, but I'm interested in your top 10 here of private sector employees. And I noticed that in your Canadian Tire, not only are new, they've new and moved into 9th position. And we know when the hospital opens, I guess they'll be added to the list. Anyway, the question is, who was dropped off? I'm intuitive, I can't remember the thing, but I think First Canadian Title used to be here.
First Canadian Title, we confirmed the numbers with First Canadian Title. They used to be in a database as 500 employees. We did confirm that they are actually at 300 employees.
So we've lost 200 there?
I don't think
because the building got bigger and the number of employees got less.
I don't think the 500 numbers was entirely accurate.
Okay, yeah, because I thought that they used to be on the list, and I wondered where they would be now, but you'd say they'd be somewhere around the 300s, so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
They're just below the cutoff there, Councillor Bird. Councillor Demoff.
See the top 10, Dominion of Canada is at number 10 at 350.
When we were talking about the hospital, it would be public sector, would it not?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, it would be, and it would show up as institutional development on the building permit activity.
All you've dealt with here have been private sector, and that's why Sheridan College isn't here as well, because it would be institutional or public sector. So those would be that would be a different report for us if you were dealing with those job numbers and construction.
That's correct.
Permits? Okay. Do you know also the Joshua Creek Center, do you know how much of that is pre-leased?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we've had recent meetings with the realtors for the Joshua Creek Center. They do not have anyone confirmed that we're aware of, and they are actively looking for occupants.
So it's being built strictly on spec, and then they're also looking at building a 6-story office tower as phase 2?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the director? Oh, go ahead.
Now you've got me intrigued, because what we have on the screen doesn't match up with what's on page 12 of your report.
He's noticed that Mattamy is on the slide, but not on the paper.
Dufferin Construction's another one?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that's a list we'll confirm for you.
Okay. Thank you. The others there seem to be correct, but yeah, I know Mattamy is still here, as is Dufferin.
Well, we're glad things got better between the report and the slideshow. I believe Councillor Knoll is next.
Yeah, quick question. First of all, my annual comment, thank you very much. You've done a fantastic job again. My congratulations to the whole team. I want to ask about the vacancy rate. It's reported here at 14.4% for office and commercial vacancy. How does that compare to other municipalities?
Through Mayor Burton, I don't have those numbers with me at this time, but I can certainly provide them for you.
I'd be curious to see what that looks like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Thank you, Ms. St. George. We enjoyed that report.
If I might add, the hard copies of the annual report will be available and provided for you at the end of the week. Unfortunately, they are still at the printer.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm looking for a motion to receive the report. Councillor Adams, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? The report is received. Now, Council, we need to do two things, or maybe it's 3 things. We need to go into camera for 2 matters concerning litigation or potential litigation and solicitor-client privilege, and 1 matter relating to a personal matter about an identifiable individual or individuals. And so I would, and that will, and really we've concluded all the rest of the business of the meeting. So I'd be looking for a motion to repair into a meeting closed to the public for those purposes. Councillor Johnston, all in favor? Councillor,
No.
you're voting?
I'm voting, but also saying if we have to go beyond 10 o'clock, do we have to do the motion in public? If in fact we do?
Yes.
Okay, would we do that at this time too?
Perhaps, I was optimistic that we wouldn't take that long, but,
That's fine. I just
but
thought
you know what?
If we have to go in and out,
Why not belt and suspenders? Let's lay that motion aside for a second. I'll look for a motion to go past 10 o'clock if necessary. Councillor Elgar, thank you for that. Any in favor of that? Oh, enough to pass it. Thank you very much. So now, Councillor Johnston's motion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries too. Madam Clerk, let's try again to rig the chamber for a meeting closed to the public. I have to turn that. All right, council now resumes its public session, having met in a meeting closed to the public as permitted under Section 239 of the Municipal Act and Section 2 of the Procedure Bylaw to consider items relating to a personal matter about an identifiable individual or individuals and litigation or potential litigation involving the town. And council made so the first thing I'd like a motion to receive. Where did that piece of paper go? I wonder if a councillor could accommodate us with a motion that the confidential verbal update provided by the Commissioner of Community Services regarding personal matters about an identified individual or individuals, including municipal employees, be received. Councillor Adams, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That report is received. Now, I need a motion. I need a mover for, I guess I'll turn to Councillor Burke for this.
That just needs to be read. It was already passed.
I'm going to read it. I was going to read it.
Okay.
That legal staff be directed to attend in opposition to the appeal by Bassam Salmon before the Ontario Municipal Board regarding Committee of Adjustment Decision CAV A/194/2011 on 453 Wedgwood Drive. Councillor Bird so moves. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. And now we also need, where's my other slip? There we go. No. There we go. Back here. We also need a motion that legal staff be instructed to present to the Ontario Municipal Board the modifications to the Livable Oakville plan detailed in the confidential report dated February 8th, 2012, and the memo dated 27th February. And Councillor Johnston moves that. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Now, a motion to rise and report. Councillor Demoff, thank you for that. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on confidential consent items C1 and C2 and discussion item 1, confidential discussion item C3 and C4, and advisory committee minutes item 2 as noted by the clerk. I need a mover and seconder for that report. Councillor Johnston, Councillor Knoll, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. We have a tiny little bit of new business of a congratulatory nature. And if our planning director would come front, we can do that.
A little worky. Well, you just dealt with a personnel matter. Oh, good.
Ms. Anderson, as our planning director, you have been sorely missed, and we have our welcome back cake to try to show you how much. Sterilized utensils. All right, that was good fun. If I could have a mover and seconder for consideration of the bylaws. Councillor Khan, Councillor Grant, thank you. This is for 2012-18, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a meeting of council. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been a pleasure working with you tonight, and there's cake. We are adjourned.